Captain Daniel Price gripped the control stick as his ship shook violently. The screech of tearing metal filling the cockpit around him. The alarms blared in his ears. Red lights flashing like angry eyes across every panel. And he knew this was going to be bad. He had been flying research vessels for 12 years, exploring the far reaches of space beyond any human settlement. But he had never felt a descent like this one. The planet below appeared suddenly through the clouds. A dark sphere with green forests and deep canyons carved across its surface. Daniel had no choice anymore. No time for a graceful landing. So he aimed for the largest flat area he could see and braced himself for impact. The ship screamed as it fell, every system failing one after another. And then came the crash. The impact threw Daniel against his restraints and knocked the wind from his lungs. He sat there for a long moment in the darkness, just breathing, just being alive. He checked himself for serious injuries and found none that mattered. Then he moved slowly to the emergency exit and pushed it open. The air outside was cool and smelled like rain and growing things. The crash site was a disaster, with pieces of the ship scattered across the landing zone like the broken parts of a toy. Daniel walked through the wreckage, checking what could be salvaged, what was lost forever. His communication array was destroyed. His main engines were nothing but twisted metal, and his navigation systems were completely fried. He was stranded, at least for a while, as he moved deeper into the debris field. Daniel heard something that made him stop. He heard a sound that was not metal grinding or electrical systems popping. It was a sound almost like breathing, but not quite. Something clicked and whistled in a pattern that seemed purposeful. Daniel followed the sound behind a massive piece of hull plating, partially buried under broken cargo containers. Leia figured Daniel's first instinct was fear. This was not human. He stepped back, his hand reaching for the emergency beacon at his belt. But then he saw she was injured badly. She had a roughly humanoid shape, with 2 arms and 2 legs and a torso. But everything about her was different. Her skin was pale like moonlight, almost translucent in some places, where it stretched thin over what he guessed were her ribs. Her eyes were closed. But when Daniel looked at them closely, he could see they had no whites, just a dark reflective surface. Her hair, if it could be called, that was thin and silver, sticking to her face, which was streaked with what looked like blood. Her clothing seemed to be some kind of dark material that had torn in several places. Daniel knew nothing about alien physiology, but he knew about injury. He could see that one of her legs was bent at an angle legs should not bend, and there was a long gash across her ribs where dark blood had already begun to dry. She was breathing, though with a kind of clicking rhythm that was clearly not human. The logical thing would be to wait for rescue, to report the alien presence, to let the military handle this when humans found alien life. The protocols were clear, but Daniel looked at her face, even though it was alien and strange, and he saw pain there. He saw something that was suffering. He made his decision before his mind could fully form all the reasons why it was dangerous. He carefully moved the cargo containers away from her body, being as gentle as he could, and checked to see if she was conscious. She did not respond to his touch. She seemed completely unconscious. Unaware of him, Daniel carried her back to what remained of his ship. The main cabin was still intact. Though power was low, the emergency medical kit was still in its storage locker. And he brought her inside and lay her carefully on the cot, bolted to the wall, over the next few hours. Daniel tried to do what he could. She was clearly dying, and without knowing anything about her biology, he might make things worse. But he cleaned her wounds with the disinfectant from the medical kit. He splinted her injured leg using what materials he could find. He tried to get water into her, but she would not swallow as night fell on this strange planet. Daniel sat beside the cot and watched her breathe. He did not know her name, did not know what her kind ate or needed to survive, did not know if she would kill him the moment she woke up, but he knew she was alive and she was hurt. And in that moment, that was all that mattered to him. He settled into the chair near the cot and tried to rest, keeping watch over this impossible creature that had fallen into his life as suddenly as his ship had fallen from the sky. The engines of his vessel were silent now. There was only the sound of her breathing. That strange clicking sound like a clock counting down to something he could not see. 3 days had passed since Daniel pulled the alien woman from the wreckage, and she still had not moved. She breathed, though barely, with that same strange clicking rhythm that filled the quiet of the ship. He had checked her wounds regularly, changed the bandages, and tried everything he could think of to keep her comfortable. He even managed to rig a makeshift four-line using materials from his emergency medical kit, though he had no idea if her body could process human fluids on the 4th day. Her eyes open, Daniel was sitting in the corner of the cabin, trying to repair a radio that would probably never work again. When he heard her breath change, it became faster, more labored, and he looked up to see those dark, reflective eyes staring. At the ceiling of the ship, he moved quickly to the cot and leaned over her carefully, trying not to appear threatening. She flinched when she saw him, making that clicking sound more rapidly now, like a warning signal or a call for help. Daniel raised both his hands slowly to show he had no weapons, and he spoke in a soft voice, the way someone would speak to a frightened animal. "My name is Daniel," he said slowly, spacing each word out clearly. "I am not going to hurt you. I found you in the crash. You were hurt. I brought you here to help you." The woman did not respond to his words, but her dark eyes tracked his movements. She seemed confused, disoriented, and her gaze jumped from the walls to the ceiling to Daniel himself, taking in everything around her with what looked like panic. She tried to move and gasped in pain. Realizing then what Daniel already knew about her condition, she was badly hurt, and she was afraid. Daniel moved very slowly to a locker near her cot and retrieved a small handheld computer from a compartment. He scrolled through the emergency translation software that all human ships carried, though no one really expected to need it. He set it to scan for biological patterns and held it near her. The device beeped and whirred, and then a voice came from its speaker, clearly artificial but functional. It spoke in a language that sounded like clicks and whistles translated into words. The device then began to process her sounds, trying to match them to known alien languages from the database. After several minutes, the translator found a partial match to the HFY language, an alien species known to inhabit the outer galaxies. Daniel's heart jumped at the HFY were predators, hunters, apex beings that showed no mercy and took what they wanted. Daniel had read reports about them, warnings really, about staying far away from any confirmed HFY territory. He looked at the woman again, and this time he could see the subtle signs of her species, the elongated structure of her jaw, the way her fingers had slightly toothy joints, the pale iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer in certain light. He had found one of the most dangerous creatures in known space, and he was now alone with her, far from help. The translator device buzzed again, and words came through, slowly at first, then faster, as the AI adjusted to her speech pattern. "Where?" The device translated her clicks. "Where am I? What are you? I can smell your fear. Human. That makes your blood sweeter smelling. Why have you not run away?" Daniel kept his voice calm, despite the sudden spike of terror in his chest. "You were hurt. I found you. I brought you to my ship. My name is Daniel Price. I am a human from Earth. What is your name?" The HFY woman closed her dark eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them again, they seemed clearer, more focused. She clicked and whistled, and the translator caught her meaning. "I am Silas," she said through the device. "I was separated from my hunting pod. I do not know how long I have been unconscious. The hunger is beginning. I can feel it. My kind does not survive long without feeding. Human, without prey. And you smell like very good prey." Daniel felt his throat go dry, but he did not move. He did not run. He spoke again in that same careful voice. "You are injured. Silas, you cannot hunt, you can barely move. Let me help you recover. And then we will figure out what happens next. Silas tried to laugh, but it came out as a series of rapid clicking sounds that seemed to hurt her. The pain on her alien face was clear. You would help a Kethver. You would tend to one of my kind when every instinct you have is screaming at you to kill me or hide. Why, your species is known for survival instinct. You should not be capable of this, because pain looks the same on every face, Daniel said simply. Because being hurt means being alive, and helping the alive makes sense to me, because you cannot hurt anyone right now. And that is reason enough. I do not know your people, Silas. I only know you. And right now you are just someone who is suffering. He brought water and held the cup to her lips. She drank it slowly. And then she looked at him again with those dark, reflective eyes. And something in her expression had changed. It was not trust exactly, but it was something, a small crack in the wall between predator and prey, between fear and understanding. Over the next 5 days, Silas grew stronger, the water and the limited supplies of human protein that Daniel shared with her seemed to help her wounds began to heal quickly, faster than Daniel would have expected, and her strength returned bit by bit. The translator improved as the AI learned her language better, and for the first time, they could actually communicate in something close to real conversation. Silas told him about the Kethver way of life, about hunting pods and the constant need for strength and dominance, about a culture where showing weakness meant death. She spoke about her separation from her pod, and how she had crashed on this planet trying to flee some kind of conflict. Her people were scattered across the galaxy, taking what they needed, consuming what they had to survive. But Silas also spoke of something else, something that seemed to bother her. She spoke of Daniel's kindness and how it made no sense in the framework of everything she had been taught. Her species believed that compassion was a weakness, that caring for others was impossible for strong beings, that every interaction was about dominance and feeding. Yet here was a human, clearly weaker than her, risking everything to help her survive. Daniel, she asked one evening as they sat in the cabin with the lights from the planet reflecting through the window, why do you care if I live or die? I am a predator. I am your enemy by any reasonable measure. I could kill you easily if I wished. Yet you care because you are not just a Kethver, Daniel replied. You are Silas. You have a name. You have thoughts and fears and confusion. You are an individual, and that matters more to me than your species or your instincts. 10 days after the crash, Daniel's emergency beacon finally worked. He had spent hours trying to repair it, scavenging parts from the destroyed systems around the ship. And finally, the signal went out into the vast emptiness of space. He did not know how long it would take for rescue to arrive, but he knew someone would come eventually. That was the protocol for crashed ships with human crew aboard. Search and rescue would come. When he told Silas about the beacon, something in her expression changed. She was standing by the window of the ship looking out at the alien landscape, and her whole body went rigid. The clicking sound she made became faster, more distressed, and she turned to face Daniel with fear clear in her dark eyes. How long? She asked through the translator device. How long until they arrive? I do not know. Daniel said honestly, could be days, could be weeks. Depends on where the nearest station is and how quickly they can mobilize a team. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked back to the cot and sat down slowly, as if the weight of understanding had suddenly become too much. They will destroy me, she said. Your people, they will detect my presence before they even land. They will see that I am Kethver, and they will assume I am a threat. I will be killed before I can even explain. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to say that humans were reasonable and would listen to him. But he knew she was probably right. Military protocol for first contact with hostile species was clear: get everyone to safety, contain the threat, eliminate if necessary, There was no room for nuance when dealing with predatory aliens. I will not let that happen. Daniel said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I will explain what happened. I will tell them you saved my life, that you could have killed me 1,000 times, but you chose not to. She made a sound that the translator interpreted as a laugh. Cool and sad both at once. You cannot protect me, human. Your kind does not have the power to protect an alien predator from other humans. The instinct to survive is too strong. The need to eliminate threats is too deep, but there was something else in her tone. Underneath the resignation, there was almost a kind of relief, as if she had already accepted what was coming, and that acceptance was a kind of peace over the next 3 days. Daniel and Silas spent more time together. They talked about everything. They spoke about his life before the crash, about his family waiting for him back on Earth, about why he had become a researcher instead of taking a safer job on one of the colony worlds. Silas told him about HFY art and culture, about how her people made music with sounds that humans could not hear, about ancient traditions that stretched back hundreds of years in their civilization. They were not friends exactly. The difference between them was too vast. They were not lovers. Not with the gulf of biology and fear between them, but they were something that transcended both those categories. They were two beings who had seen past the surface and recognized the person underneath. On the morning that Daniel's ship's sensors detected the rescue vessel descending through the atmosphere, Silas did something unexpected. She asked him to help her stand. She was stronger now, her wounds nearly healed, her movements confident and powerful. She led him to a small cabin in the back of the ship, where she retrieved a sealed container. This is my true face, she said as she opened it. Every HFY has a protective layer that we keep over our skin, over our eyes, over our features. It protects us when we are hunting. It gives us our strength. This layer is difficult to remove. Normally, we only show our true face to those we trust completely. And in our culture, that never happens. Not ever. She began to carefully peel away the protective covering from her face, moving slowly. With deliberation, the process seemed to cause her pain, but she did not stop. Daniel watched as the hardened outer layer came away and revealed what was underneath. The face that emerged was different, softer, more vulnerable. The structure was still alien, but the eyes were less reflective, more capable of showing emotion. Her features had a kind of fragile beauty to them. I need you to see this, she said, her voice coming through the translator clearer than ever before. Because when your rescue team arrives, this face will matter. I will not resist them. But I need you to know what I look like when I am not hiding. I need you to carry this memory with you. Not the HFY predator, but the individual underneath. Will you do that for me? Daniel looked at her true face, at the vulnerability she was showing him, at the profound trust she had placed in him by removing that protective layer. He nodded. I will remember, he said. I will make sure they know. The sound of the approaching ship grew louder as it descended toward their landing site. Daniel and Silas stood together, looking out the window as the rescue vessel came into view. It was a military transport, sleek and fast, designed for quick evacuations and combat if necessary. Daniel knew that the scanning systems would already be picking up Silas's alien signature. She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that was purely human, something she had learned from watching him over the past 2 weeks. Her grip was strong but gentle. No longer the grip of a predator, but of someone saying goodbye whatever happens. She said, thank you for seeing me as an individual. Thank you for that gift. The rescue shuttle touched down outside the ship, and soon the sound of boots on metal echoed through the corridors. Daniel could hear voices shouting commands, pulling his attention toward the entrance to his ship. Silas squeezed his hand once more and then released it. Go, she said. Be with your own kind. Explain what happened. Try to make them understand, but if they do not, at least one human will know the truth about me. Daniel Wanted to argue again, wanted to fight, but he knew it would only make things worse. Instead, he walked toward the shuttle, toward rescue, carrying with him the memory of a true face that would haunt and inspire him for the rest of his life. The rescue team moved through the ship with weapons drawn, their protective suits sealed tight against potential contamination. The captain, a woman named Sarah with cold eyes and a scar across her left cheek, approached Daniel with concern on her face, but her hand stayed near her weapon. We detected an alien life form, she said. Highly dangerous signature, Kethra classification. Where is it? Daniel raised his hands to show he was not a threat. She is in the back cabin. Her name is Silas, and she will not resist you. She removed her protective layer to show me her true face. She is an individual, not just a predator. Sarah's expression hardened. Protocol dictates immediate containment and termination of hostile life forms, she said, especially anything from a species known to be predatory. I am sorry, Captain Price, but we cannot risk it, no. Daniel said, stepping forward. You do not understand. She saved my life. She could have killed me. She chose not to. She is not a threat. Sarah gestured to two of her soldiers. Get him to the shuttle. We need him out of danger. Daniel did not resist as they guided him toward the exit. But he looked back toward the cabin where Silas was waiting. The last thing he saw before they took him outside was her shadow against the light, standing calmly, no longer hiding behind her protective layer. Ready for whatever came, he was in the shuttle. The engines beginning to warm up when he heard the sound. It was a roar. Not the roar of an animal, but something more. Something that contained pain and acceptance and dignity all mixed together. It was Silas, showing them who and what she was in the only way left to her. They must have reached her, must have given her an ultimatum. Daniel ran back out of the shuttle, running toward the ship, the soldiers shouting at him to stop. But he was faster than they expected. He burst back through the entrance, just as Captain Sarah was raising her weapon. Silas stood in the middle of the cabin with her true face fully exposed, her eyes reflecting the light, her whole being vulnerable and present. Do not do this, Daniel shouted. She is not attacking you. She is choosing not to attack you. That is the strongest thing anyone can do. Silas looked at him with those clear, dark eyes that showed everything she felt. Her fear, her sadness, her strange kind of peace about what was happening. Daniel moved toward her, and she did not move away. He took her in his arms. This alien creature that should have been his greatest fear. And he held her as Captain Sarah and her team rushed in with weapons. For a moment, nothing happened. The soldiers froze, uncertain what to do when facing this scene of human and alien together, not in conflict, but in connection. Then Silas spoke, her voice through the translator sounding calm and clear. I am ready. I accept what comes, but I ask only this: that someone remembers who I was, not what I was, but who I was as an individual. She felt light in Daniel's arms. Or perhaps she was simply growing lighter as her body began to give up its struggle against the alien world, against the wound that had never fully healed, against the fundamental incompatibility between her species and this place. Her breathing grew more shallow, the clicking sounds becoming softer. Can you move? She asked him. Can you let me down? I want to see the sky one more time before I go. Daniel carefully lowered her to the floor, keeping his arms around her, and they moved together to the window. The alien sun was high and bright, casting long shadows across the green forests and deep canyons beyond. The sky was a color Daniel had never seen before. Not quite blue, not quite purple. Something uniquely beautiful to this world. It is beautiful, Silas said. I did not have time to appreciate it when I was dying the first time. But now I can see it. Now I can feel it on my face without the protective layer. This is what I wanted to remember most. Your kindness second, but your world first. Her breathing became more irregular. Her dark eyes began to close slowly. Daniel felt her weight shift completely against him as her strength finally gave out. He lowered them both to the ground and cradled her head in his lap, his hand stroking her thin silver hair. "Thank you for everything," she whispered through the translator. "Thank you for seeing." Mesh said nothing else after that. She simply lay there, breathing slower and slower as the alarms on the rescue team's equipment grew more frantic. Captain Sarah must have realized what was happening because she lowered her weapon. Silas's breathing became shallower with each moment, the clicking sounds growing quieter until finally they stopped completely. Daniel sat there with her body in his arms, the alien sun streaming through the window, and he wept. He wept for the loss of someone he had barely known, for the missed opportunity to truly save her, for the tragedy of two beings finding connection only to have it ripped away by circumstance and biology and the cruel indifference of the universe. He wept because she was an individual, and now she was gone and the galaxy would never know her name. 6 months had passed since the rescue. 6 months since Silas's death on that planet far from anywhere that mattered in the vast expanse of human space. Daniel had filed his report with the military, a detailed account of everything that had happened. His superiors had read it with skepticism at first. They questioned his objectivity. They suggested that he had been under extreme stress and emotional duress. They wondered if perhaps the alien had somehow influenced his perception of events through chemicals or pheromones or some other form of alien manipulation. But Daniel had submitted the data. He had included the translation records from Silas's own words. He had described her sacrifice and her choice to remove her protective layer to show him her true self. He had painted a picture of an individual, not a monster, not a threat, but a being capable of growth and change and moral choice. The report sat in military archives where few people would ever read it. Then something unexpected happened. A scientist from the research division read the full report and found it fascinating. She reached out to Daniel for interviews and clarifications. She began to build an academic paper around his experience. She contacted other researchers who had studied Kethver biology and behavior, and slowly a new picture began to emerge. The Kethver were not simply predatory monsters driven only by instinct. They had complex societies. They had art and culture and individual variation, just like humans did. They were capable of moral reasoning and choice. The evidence had always been there in their technological sophistication and their organized social structures, but no one had been looking for those qualities. Everyone had simply accepted the reputation of the predator. Daniel's report became the foundation for a major shift in human understanding of alien species. Contact protocols were revised, new frameworks for communication were established. Scientists began pushing for peace negotiations with distant Kethver settlements rather than simple aggressive defense. Some of this work would take decades to show real results, but the seeds had been planted. The memorial Daniel had created for Silas became a small point of pilgrimage for those researchers and philosophers who were interested in the question of what it meant to be an individual transcending species boundaries. He had chosen a place on his home world, a garden where the light was soft and the air smelled of growing things, and there he had placed a simple marker with her name, Silas. The marker read, "Who was more than what she was born to be." People came to this place and read those words and thought about what they meant. They thought about Kethvar, women and human men, and the impossible bridges that could be built between them. They thought about the power of seeing someone truly, of recognizing their individual worth despite every biological and cultural difference that stood between them, known to Daniel and unknown to any human. Something else was also happening in the vast reaches of space where the Kethver made their lives. A survivor from Silas's hunting pod had returned to their home territories and had reported what happened. She had told them how their sister had been separated from the group and had crashed on a Death World planet. She had reported that Silas had encountered a human and that something unexpected had occurred between them, something that violated every principle of Kethver culture. The story spread through Kethver communities slowly at first, then faster. The idea that one of their kind had developed a connection with prey, that she had removed her protective layer, that she had trusted an alien completely, that she had chosen death rather than predation. All of this was shocking and strange, but it was also powerful among the younger Kethver, among those who had begun to question whether their entire way of life had to be defined by hunting and dominance and endless predation. The story of Silas became something else. It became a legend of one who had transcended. It became proof that change was possible, that individuals could choose something different than what their species demanded of them. The choice that Silas had made to show vulnerability, to trust, to find connection, those things began to spread through Kethver culture. Like a seed growing into something larger, elder Kethver were disturbed by this trend in their youth. They saw it as weakness, as a dangerous ideological infection introduced by human contact. But even they had to acknowledge that Silas had accomplished something remarkable. She had walked a path no other Kethver had walked. She had been a bridge between two species. She had shown that comprehension was possible, that understanding could transcend even the gulf between predator and prey in an unexpected turn. The Kethver began to reach out to humans for dialogue for the first time in recorded history. Peace was not simply imposed by threat, but was offered as a possibility, as a choice that both species could make together. The conversations were difficult. They were filled with misunderstanding and old fears and the weight of everything both species had expected of the other. That they happened. They continued. They grew none. Of this would have been possible if Daniel had simply run, if he had seen Silas as a predator to be feared and reported and eliminated, instead of as an individual to be helped in that one small choice on a crashed ship on an alien world. He had set in motion events that would echo through galactic history. Years later, when Daniel was old and had retired from his research, he would sometimes sit in the memorial garden and think about Silas. He would remember her dark eyes and the way she had smiled when she saw the alien sun one last time. He would remember her voice, asking him to see her true face. He would remember the weight of her in his arms and the profound gift she had given him. He had wanted to save her life, but what Silas had truly given him was something deeper, a framework for understanding what it meant to be strong and brave. She had shown that strength was not about domination or predation, but about the willingness to be vulnerable, about the courage to choose. Mercy, about the power of seeing another being truly and honoring their worth. Galaxy was different now because Silas had existed and because Daniel had answered her with kindness. The changes were slow, but they were real. Young Kethver began to imagine lives beyond hunting. Young humans began to see alien species not as others to be feared, but as individuals to be understood. A question had been asked across the void: is coexistence possible? And the answer that Silas and Daniel had found in that small crashed ship was yes, in the memorial garden on Daniel's homeworld. The words on the simple marker caught the soft light of afternoon Silas, who was more than what she was born to be. And those words carried more weight than they appeared to carry, because they held within them the weight of transformation, the weight of one individual choosing to transcend everything her biology and culture had made her, and in doing so changing the course of history.